Two experienced hikers vanished in Utah's canyonlands. Search teams found nothing. 3 years later, scientists detected a strange ultrasonic signal screaming from deep underground, a sound no human could hear. What they discovered changed everything. Hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, would you carry an emergency beacon into the wilderness if you knew it might fail you at the worst possible moment? Because what happened to these two women will haunt you. The anxiety tightening in Rowan's chest on the evening of October 15, 2019, wasn't generalized worry. It was precise, tied to the exact minute the clock ticked past 7 in the evening. His daughter, 22-year-old Imogen Velis, was supposed to call. It was a non-negotiable agreement, the safety tether connecting their home to the remote, unforgiving canyonlands of Utah, where Imogen was backpacking. This was the end of day 4. According to the meticulously planned itinerary Rowan had pinned to his corkboard, Imogen and her best friend Alicia Kaspari, also 22, should have completed the most grueling segment of their route. They were scheduled to arrive at a small motel near a rural highway, resupply, and crucially, check in. By 8 o'clock that night, the silence felt amplified. Every mundane noise, the hum of the refrigerator, the settling of the foundation, sounded like a phone ringing, only to dissolve into stillness. Rowan had argued vehemently against this trip. Both Imogen and Alicia were experienced, competent hikers, drawn to the stark beauty and profound isolation of the Utah desert. They'd completed numerous trips together, but this expedition was different, longer, more remote, delving into areas where cell service was non-existent, and the landscape was a labyrinth of slot canyons and sheer mesas. When it became clear he couldn't forbid his adult daughter from going, Rowan insisted on stringent precautions. They carried a high-end emergency SOS beacon, capable of sending a distress signal via satellite from virtually anywhere. But driven by primal fear of the wilderness his daughter embraced, Rowan demanded more. He insisted Imogen carry a handgun as a last resort against wildlife or unpredictable threats. Now Rowan paced his living room. The precautions were meant to ensure safety, yet they hadn't prevented this silence. He checked his phone one last time. The last contact was a photo message received 4 days earlier on the morning of October 11th. It captured Imogen and Alicia reflected in the dusty window of their vehicle at the trailhead. Imogen on the right wore a vibrant hot pink jacket, a purple headband holding back her hair, sunglasses perched on her head. Alicia beside her wore a lime green windbreaker and an olive green cap, smiling softly. Behind their reflection, the sun-drenched reddish-orange canyons loomed, the landscape that had now seemingly swallowed them whole. The photo was time-stamped 9:14 in the morning. It was the last confirmed sighting. At 8:30, Rowan dialed the motel. The desk clerk checked the register. No one by those names had arrived. The confirmation landed heavily. This wasn't a delay. Imogen was organized. She kept her promises. Rowan immediately called the local sheriff's department. He explained the situation, emphasizing the missed check-in and the gear they carried. A formal missing persons report was initiated. The vast machinery of search and rescue began to mobilize in the Utah desert. The response was swift, but the terrain was notorious. The Utah canyonlands aren't merely empty. They're actively complex, a geological labyrinth designed to confuse and entrap. Scorching days give way to freezing nights. Slot canyons run for miles, susceptible to flash floods even when the sky above is clear. Within 24 hours, a command center was established. The first critical discovery was the women's vehicle, found exactly where they'd left it, locked and undisturbed. No signs of struggle, no discarded gear, nothing suggesting foul play. Helicopters began grid searches from the air, scanning vast expanses of slick rock and juniper scrub, looking for a flash of color, the pink of Imogen's jacket, the green of Alicia's. On the ground, experienced trackers and volunteers hiked known trails. K-9 units were deployed, but the desert yielded nothing. The slick rock terrain made tracking exceedingly difficult. A central troubling question dominated briefings. Why hadn't the emergency beacon been activated? Investigators contacted the monitoring company. They confirmed the unit was registered to Imogen and appeared operational when they departed, but no distress signal had ever been received. The silence of the beacon was ominous. It suggested a sudden catastrophe, a fall or rock slide that incapacitated both simultaneously, preventing them from deploying the device. Rowan arrived at search headquarters, his face etched with exhaustion and desperate hope. He provided detailed inventories of their gear, mentioning the handgun, adding another layer to scenarios investigators considered. Weeks dragged on. The intense initial search gradually scaled back as leads dried up. Then, in the 5th week, something unexpected emerged. A specialized tracking team working far off established trails in a rugged side canyon stumbled upon evidence of significant recent human activity. It wasn't a typical hiker's camp. They found fresh excavation marks, deep scars suggesting heavy tools or small explosives, discarded chemical containers, specialized drills, evidence of mineral extraction partially concealed under camouflage netting, illegal wildcatting, unauthorized mineral prospecting. The discovery electrified the investigation. The remote Utah desert was known to attract individuals who operated outside the law. Modern-day prospectors, often transient, sometimes heavily armed, fiercely territorial over their illegal claims. The possibility that Imogen and Alicia had inadvertently stumbled upon such an operation and met with violence was immediately plausible. It offered a terrifying explanation for their complete disappearance and the beacon's silence. The investigation shifted dramatically from search and rescue to potential criminal investigation. Authorities began tracking down individuals involved. This was complex. These people operated off the grid, using cash, burner phones, moving frequently between remote locations across several states. Investigators spent weeks analyzing evidence, tracing lot numbers on chemical containers, analyzing tire tracks, interviewing informants within the shadowy community of wildcatters. The effort yielded several persons of interest, men known for wildcatting and histories of violence. A multi-state manhunt began. One primary suspect was tracked to a remote compound in Nevada. A tactical team executed a search warrant at dawn. The suspect was apprehended, but the compound search yielded nothing connecting him to the missing women. He provided a corroborated alibi. Another suspect in Arizona was interviewed extensively. No evidence linked him to the case. One by one, identified prospectors were located and cleared. The wildcatting operation, while highly suspicious, ultimately proved coincidental. It had been active but appeared abandoned shortly before Imogen and Alicia began their hike. The disappointment was crushing. As harsh desert winter approached, bringing snow and freezing temperatures, the active search was officially suspended. The disappearance was classified as a cold case. The prevailing theory reverted to initial assessment: a tragic hiking accident in some unknown, inaccessible location. For 3 years, the silence persisted. The summer of 2022 arrived, marking nearly 3 years since they'd vanished. The case had faded into obscurity. Rowan continued his private search, returning periodically, but hope of finding them alive had evaporated. He sought only closure. The breakthrough, when it came, originated not from law enforcement, but from an entirely unrelated scientific endeavor in a region so remote it had never been considered relevant. Dr. David Pewitt, a specialist in geoacoustics from a research university, was leading a small team in an extremely isolated section of the Utah desert, miles from the original search zone. His research focused on unique acoustic properties of the canyonlands, studying how microseismic tremors propagated through complex geological formations. The team had spent several days hiking into a deep, narrow slot canyon. The environment was otherworldly, walls rising hundreds of feet, the space so narrow they had to turn sideways to pass through. The light was dim, the air cool and still, a place of profound natural silence, ideal for acoustic measurements. They were calibrating their primary instrument, a ruggedized portable spectrum analyzer called a Sinus Soundbook Mark II. This device, connected to specialized microphones and sensors driven into rock, could detect acoustic signals far beyond human hearing range, both subsonic and ultrasonic. Dr. Pewitt monitored the display as calibration initiated. He expected familiar patterns of low-frequency background noise. Instead, the device registered an intense, unexpected anomaly. The readings indicated a powerful, persistent signal, but it wasn't in the audible spectrum. It was localized, seemingly emanating from the rock itself, concentrated in the high-frequency range. Ultrasonic, far above the threshold of human hearing. But on the device, it was screaming. The numerical readouts spiked. 57.6 and 53.8 displayed prominently, indicating volume levels far exceeding any natural background noise. Dr. Pewitt frowned, assuming equipment malfunction. "Check the probe connection," he instructed. The connection was secure. He ran calibration again. The signal persisted, a sharp, unwavering peak on the spectrum analyzer. Everything was functioning correctly. The equipment was detecting a real signal, a sound omnipresent in the silent canyon, yet entirely inaudible to them. The team spent hours trying to triangulate the source, moving sensors, analyzing subtle shifts in signal strength and frequency. The signal was unusual, not only in intensity, but in consistency. Natural geological resonances fluctuate, modulated by wind, temperature, seismic activity. This signal was stable, mechanical in its precision. It felt distinctly artificial. Dr. Pewitt logged the data meticulously, noting precise coordinates and signal characteristics. Initially, he suspected an unusual geological phenomenon, perhaps a piezoelectric effect from immense pressure on quartz crystals, or interference from a distant communication tower being channeled through rock. They concluded measurements and hiked out, the mystery of the silent scream unresolved, an abstract curiosity in their data logs. Several days later, the research team relocated to a different area several miles away. This new location was characterized by a different geological formation, a high mesa scarred by historical mining activity, dotted with dilapidated, abandoned mines, relics of bygone mineral extraction. The team was surveying near one of these abandoned mining complexes. They set up the Soundbook Mark II. As the device powered up, immediately the anomaly reappeared. The exact same high-frequency acoustic signature they'd recorded in the slot canyon miles away. The intensity was lower here, but the frequency was identical. The silent scream had followed them. Dr. Pewitt felt a sudden chill despite desert heat. The signal wasn't a localized geological phenomenon. It was being broadcast, and the unique geology was channeling the sound, allowing it to travel through rock over long distances. He began investigating the immediate vicinity, focusing on the abandoned mine complex. The main entrance was a dark, gaping maw in the mesa side. Old wooden supports framing the entrance were rotted and splintered. As he approached cautiously, he noticed something alarming. The supports appeared to have failed, causing a collapse inward. The ground around the entrance was disturbed, suggesting significant weight had caused the failure, punching through the fragile surface into darkness below. It didn't look like slow decay. It looked like structural failure. The combination of the acoustic signal and structural damage created an unsettling possibility. Was someone trapped down there? The persistent signal suggested an electronic device was active underground. Dr. Pewitt carefully circled the collapsed opening, scanning for clues. The area was covered in thick dust and debris. Then, partially obscured by dried sagebrush near the collapse edge, he saw it. A specialized water filtration straw, high-end hiking equipment designed for emergency survival. Relatively modern, weathered but intact. The discovery changed everything. The abstract scientific anomaly suddenly became a potential human tragedy. He immediately retrieved the team's satellite phone and alerted authorities, describing the acoustic anomaly, the collapsed mine, the hiking gear discovery. He provided precise coordinates. Authorities, recognizing potential significance, initiated immediate response. While waiting for the rescue team, they cross-referenced the filtration straw description against missing persons databases. They pulled the cold case file for Imogen Velis and Alicia Kaspari. The specialized brand and model matched the gear inventory provided by Rowan in 2019. After 3 years of silence, the desert had finally yielded a clue. Not a footprint or distress signal, but an electronic scream detected by scientists looking for something else entirely. A specialized mine rescue team was dispatched to the location. They arrived within 24 hours, heavy equipment airlifted by helicopter. The scene was daunting. The abandoned mine was old, its history unknown, structure unmapped. The collapsed entrance was highly unstable. Surrounding rock was fractured, remaining wooden supports severely deteriorated. Any attempt to enter without stabilizing the entrance risked triggering secondary collapse, burying both potential victims and rescuers. The rescue operation began with meticulous, dangerous stabilization. The team used pneumatic shores, cribbing, bracing materials to secure the entrance and initial mineshaft section. Work was slow, conducted under constant threat of structural failure. While stabilization was underway, the rescue team deployed their own acoustic monitoring equipment, confirming the presence of the high-frequency signal detected by Dr. Pewitt. It was stronger here, echoing within the confined mineshaft space. An eerie sensation, standing in silent desert, knowing equipment was detecting a sound their ears couldn't perceive, a sound that had been broadcasting continuously for 3 years. Once the entrance was deemed sufficiently stable, the rescue team began descent. The initial section was a steep, rubble-strewn incline, remnants of the collapse that likely trapped the women. Darkness was absolute, pierced only by headlamp beams. Air was thick with dust. As they moved deeper, they began finding evidence of human passage, footprints in dust, disturbed rocks, discarded items. The trail led through narrow, winding tunnels deeper into the mesa heart. About 100 yards into the mine system, in a small chamber shielded from the main tunnel, they made a significant discovery: a makeshift camp. The scene told a story of desperate survival. Empty food wrappers from dehydrated backpacking meals scattered on the dusty floor. Depleted batteries, dozens of them, piled in a corner, indicating extensive light source use. 2 sleeping bags laid out, one partially covered by thick dust. The discovery confirmed investigators' grim theory. Imogen and Alicia had survived the initial fall. They'd likely been walking over poorly supported ground near the mine entrance when it gave way, plunging them into darkness below. Trapped underground with no way to climb out, they'd established this camp, pooling resources, attempting to survive. Analysis suggested they'd lived underground for weeks. The amount of consumed supplies indicated prolonged effort to ration food and water. The rescue team used equipment to trace the sound, following echoes through labyrinthine tunnels. The signal seemed to emanate from a section that had suffered significant internal collapse. They pinpointed the origin. Lodged in the debris, partially crushed by a fallen boulder, was the emergency SOS beacon. The device was still active, its small LED indicator light flashing weakly in darkness. a testament to battery longevity. Investigators examined the device, analyzing the damage and malfunction nature. They determined the fall impact or subsequent collapse caused critical failure in internal circuitry. The transmitter was damaged, rendering it incapable of broadcasting standard distress signals on designated emergency frequencies. Instead, damaged electronics were emitting continuous, weak, high-frequency electronic noise, the ultrasonic scream. This malfunction explained why the beacon was never detected by the monitoring center. It was broadcasting on the wrong frequency, a signal inaudible to humans and invisible to standard emergency receivers. But unique geology intervened. Sandstone formations with specific density and composition acted as natural amplifier and conduit, channeling the ultrasonic signal through rock, allowing detection miles away in the Slot Canyon, where Dr. Pewett's team first recorded it. Investigators theorized the women had connected their high-capacity solar power bank, originally intended for charging phones during their multi-day trek, to the damaged beacon in desperate attempt to keep it operational, enabling the weak signal to persist far longer than the device's internal battery would have allowed. The beacon had been screaming for help for 3 years, but technology had failed them in the most cruel and unusual way. With the signal source identified, the search for the women continued. The atmosphere grew heavier. Evidence at the camp suggested desperate struggle for survival, but the absence of the women indicated tragic end. The rescue team continued deeper into increasingly hazardous mine system. Tunnels became narrower, air quality deteriorating. Then the cadaver dog, accompanying the team, alerted intensely, focusing on a specific area ahead. The team approached cautiously. They were met with catastrophic destruction. A massive internal collapse had completely blocked the tunnel. Tons of boulders and rock had fallen from the ceiling, creating an impassable barrier. The dog alerted again, focusing on the collapse base. The team began examining the debris field. Then they saw it, a flash of color amidst dull gray rock, the distinctive hot pink fabric of Imogen's jacket. They'd found her. Imogen's body was trapped under tons of boulders. The nature of the collapse was immediately apparent. She'd been caught in the secondary collapse. The weight crushed her instantly. Based on dust layers and remains state, the collapse occurred long ago, likely shortly after the women established their camp. The discovery confirmed the tragic fate. The report from the mine rescue team leader was delivered with professional finality, but implications were devastating. Imogen had been located, but recovery was impossible. The structural instability, particularly in the collapse area entombing her body, was too severe. Any attempt to excavate would be life-threatening with high probability of triggering catastrophic secondary collapse. The news hit Rowan with physical force. After 3 years of agonizing uncertainty, confirmation of his daughter's death was brutal closure. But inability to recover her body added agonizing cruelty. Authorities brought Rowan to the mine site. They needed him to understand the reality, to see the treacherous environment. At the entrance, the rescue team leader explained the situation using diagrams and sensor data to illustrate underground structure instability. It was a conversation no parent should endure. While Imogen's body recovery was impossible, the team had managed to retrieve crucial evidence. Imogen's backpack had been partially accessible near the collapse zone edge. They'd carefully extracted it. Inside, amidst remaining supplies and personal items, they found the handgun Rowan insisted she carry. It was secured in its holster, fully loaded. It had not been fired. It confirmed she hadn't faced threat from wildlife or humans before the collapse. Her death was tragic accident, a consequence of treacherous environment. Rowan, standing at the mine entrance that claimed his daughter's life, faced an agonizing decision. Authorities proposed sealing the mine permanently to prevent future tragedies and secure the site. It meant accepting Imogen would remain underground, entombed in darkness. With heavy heart, Rowan agreed. He requested the mine be sealed completely, transforming it into Imogen's final resting place. Days later, demolition experts arrived. They strategically placed explosive charges at the entrance, calculating the blast to cause controlled collapse that would seal the opening entirely. The detonation echoed through canyons, a final thunderous punctuation to tragedy. The entrance collapsed, sealing the mine permanently. Dust settled and silence returned. With the mine sealed and Imogen's fate confirmed, investigation shifted focus entirely to Alicia Kaspari. The makeshift camp proved Alicia had also fallen into the mine and survived initial ordeal. Analysis suggested both women were alive for several weeks underground. The critical question was, what happened to Alicia? Investigators hypothesized the collapse that killed Imogen occurred while both women were in the mine. If Alicia had been elsewhere in the tunnel system at the time, she might have survived, only to find herself trapped alone in darkness. Search of accessible mine parts found no trace of Alicia's body. This suggested two possibilities. Either her body was buried in an inaccessible section, perhaps in the same collapse that killed Imogen, or she'd found another way out. To explore this, investigators commissioned an aerial LiDAR survey. This remote sensing method uses pulsed laser light to measure distances, penetrating vegetation and creating detailed three-dimensional terrain maps. The LiDAR survey mapped the underground mine structure, revealing tunnel system extent and identifying potential anomalies. Analysis revealed something unexpected. On the opposite mesa side from the main entrance, the survey identified a narrow vertical shaft extending from underground tunnels to the surface, likely an old ventilation shaft designed to circulate air, too narrow to easily climb, but in desperate situations it might offer potential escape. A ground team was dispatched to the ventilation shaft location. The shaft top was a small, inconspicuous opening in rock, partially obscured by brush, nearly impossible to spot without precise LiDAR coordinates. The team scrutinized the opening for any sign of human passage. Then they saw it. Caught on a sharp rock protrusion, just inside the shaft opening were minute traces of fabric fibers. Fibers were carefully collected and sent for forensic analysis. Results were stunning. The fibers were synthetic, consistent with high-performance outdoor gear material, and the color was distinctive lime green. Analysis confirmed the fibers matched the distinctive green hiking jacket Alicia Kaspari was wearing when she disappeared. The discovery was a paradigm shift. Alicia Kaspari had escaped the mine. The timeline was reconstructed. Investigators theorized Alicia managed to climb the ventilation shaft sometime around November 2019, likely driven by desperation after the collapse that killed Imogen and supply depletion. She'd survived weeks underground, endured trauma of witnessing her best friend's death, and managed seemingly impossible escape. She'd emerged onto the surface alive. The mystery deepened. If Alicia escaped the mine in November 2019, why did she never reach civilization? The desert was vast and harsh, but she was an experienced hiker, resourceful, determined. She should have been able to navigate to the nearest road or settlement. The investigation was no longer about tragic accident. It was about what happened to Alicia after she emerged from darkness, alone and desperate, into the empty expanse of the Utah desert. A renewed search was launched, radiating outward from the ventilation shaft exit. But the trail was 3 years cold. The desert environment with relentless wind and occasional flash floods had long since erased any footprints. The search yielded nothing. The breakthrough came several months later in early 2023 from an unexpected source. A Bureau of Land Management surveyor was working in the area documenting illegal fencing on public land. While documenting a section of fence line that encroached on public land near a large isolated ranch, the surveyor noticed something unusual: a pile of old tires and ranch debris visible near the fence, partially concealed in a dry wash. It looked like illegal dumping. As he approached to document the violation, he noticed a strange odor. Faint decomposition mixed with old rubber and dust. He began shifting debris. He pulled back an old cracked tire and froze. Beneath the debris, partially buried in dry earth, was a human skeleton. The surveyor immediately secured the scene and alerted authorities. The remains were carefully excavated and transported to the medical examiner's office. Through dental records and DNA analysis, remains were confirmed to be Alicia Kaspari. The discovery was devastating. Alicia, who'd survived mine horrors, had died in open desert, her body discarded like trash under old tires. The initial assumption was she'd succumbed to elements shortly after escaping the mine. But the autopsy revealed horrifying twist. The forensic examination determined Alicia was severely malnourished and dehydrated at time of death, consistent with her ordeal. However, examination also revealed evidence of significant trauma that couldn't be explained by accidental death. Skeletal remains showed blunt force trauma to skull and ribs inflicted near time of death. Furthermore, the forensic anthropologist identified subtle fractures and injuries consistent with severe physical and sexual abuse. The case was immediately reclassified as homicide. Alicia had not died of exposure. She'd been murdered. The location where remains were found, near the border of the isolated ranch, immediately drew suspicion toward the owner. Forensic team meticulously analyzed remnants of Alicia's clothing. They found unusual trace evidence: chemical residues of specific industrial-grade agricultural disinfectant, commonly used in large-scale livestock operations for cleaning stalls and equipment. Not something Alicia would have encountered in wilderness. Furthermore, analysis identified unique synthetic fibers embedded in her jacket fabric, specialized high-strength fibers used in manufacturing high-end horse tack, saddles, harnesses, and ropes. The combination pointed toward specific environment: a working ranch specializing in high-quality horses. The ranch was owned by Sterling Bracken. In his late 50s, a reclusive figure known locally as fiercely territorial and hostile toward outsiders. He lived alone on sprawling property, managing a small but high-quality horse breeding operation. Background check revealed prior criminal record for assault stemming from violent dispute over grazing rights. Bracken immediately became prime suspect. Detectives arrived at Bracken's ranch to interview him. The property was isolated, oppressive. Bracken met them at the entrance, defensive and uncooperative from the outset. When detectives revealed they were investigating Alicia's disappearance and confronted him with the discovery of her remains near his fence line, Bracken's demeanor shifted. He became visibly agitated. After a long pause, he admitted to encountering Alicia in late 2019. Bracken's narrative was carefully constructed. He claimed he found Alicia wandering in the desert, delirious and severely injured. He said she was barely alive, suffering from severe malnutrition and exposure. He claimed he tried to help, bringing her to his ranch, intending to take her to the nearest town. But he claimed she succumbed to injuries shortly after arrival. He panicked, knowing about the missing hikers and fearing his criminal record would lead authorities to blame him. He made the decision to hide the body under the pile of tires near the fence line. Bracken's story was plausible on the surface, but detectives were skeptical. His demeanor was too controlled. His story didn't explain evidence of blunt force trauma and sexual abuse. Detectives secured a search warrant for his property. The search was extensive. Investigators focused on areas where Bracken might have held Alicia captive, zeroing in on a remote, unused bunkhouse situated far from the main house near horse stables. The bunkhouse appeared dilapidated from outside, but as investigators entered, they were hit by overwhelming odor. The smell of agricultural disinfectant, the same chemical residue found on Alicia's clothing. The odor was strong, suggesting recent aggressive cleaning attempt. The bunkhouse had been stripped bare, furniture removed, floors scrubbed clean. But the pervasive disinfectant smell indicated something had happened here that Bracken wanted to conceal. The breakthrough came during detailed structure search. One investigator noticed a loose floorboard near the back wall. He carefully lifted it. Beneath, hidden in the dark cavity, they found restraints fashioned from the same specialized horse tack material found on Alicia's remains. The unique synthetic fibers matched perfectly. The discovery shattered Bracken's narrative. Clear evidence of captivity and abuse. Alicia hadn't died naturally shortly after arriving. She'd been held captive, restrained, and abused. Evidence suggested horrific sequence. Alicia, desperate and vulnerable after escaping the mine, had encountered Sterling Bracken. Instead of helping, Bracken saw her desperation as opportunity. He'd abducted her, taken her to the remote bunkhouse, subjected her to prolonged abuse. The blunt force trauma indicated she'd fought back, or Bracken had become violent. Bracken had murdered her, either intentionally or as a result of the abuse. Sterling Bracken was charged with kidnapping, sexual abuse, and murder of Alicia Kaspari. The trial began in mid-2023, nearly 4 years after the disappearance. The prosecution presented meticulous, overwhelming case. They described the initial accident, the fall into the mine, desperate survival in darkness, the discovery of the makeshift camp and damaged beacon, the tragic death of Imogen, crushed in the cavern, forever entombed in the sealed mine. Then Alicia's remarkable escape, the climb up the ventilation shaft, emergence onto surface alive but vulnerable. They argued Bracken saw Alicia's desperate state as opportunity. He'd abducted her, subjected her to unimaginable abuse. The key evidence was unique trace evidence found on Alicia's remains. The agricultural disinfectant and specialized horse tack fibers linked her directly to Bracken's ranch. The climax was presentation of the restraints found hidden under the bunkhouse floorboard, matching the fibers on Alicia's remains. After several days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Sterling Bracken was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. The case closed on the dual tragedy uncovered by the anomalous sound of a damaged SOS beacon. Imogen Velis remains entombed within the sealed Utah mine, her final resting place marked only by vast silent expanse of desert. Alicia Kaspari survived the initial ordeal, emerging from darkness with fierce will to live, only to meet horrific end at the hands of an opportunistic predator in the remote, unforgiving wilderness. So here's my question for you. If you were trapped underground in complete darkness with a malfunctioning emergency beacon, would you give up hope? Or would you keep fighting for survival like these two women did? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. And if this story showed you how even the most advanced technology can fail us when we need it most, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. There are more incredible, true stories coming your way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.